it's a mystery. There are 2 commitments for Boston College football, and we don't know who either of them are. Well, I'm going to tell you who I think they are on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. So let's do a little recruiting talk. Now, I know we said we're going to have Mitch Wolf back on this week, but he's been under the weather. I've been under the weather. So we're not going to get a chance to do that. But there's so much recruiting news going on. We did a whole episode on it on Monday. We're going to do even more today. Now, as I said on Monday, there was a Jeff Hafley get in, with exclamation points in an Eagles GIF to describe that there were 2 new commitments for BC. And now we already know who one of them is. It's Ryan Mikkow, the versatile offensive lineman from Florida who committed right after his visit ended. But there's another name that we don't know. And we got a little bit of clarification this week because there was not only just that one other missing player, but there's another one because Dave Deguglielmo, the offensive line coach, talked about having 2 big dogs committing. So let's look into who that could be. Because if Guglielmo's saying that there's 2 big dogs, that means to me that there's 2 offensive linemen. And it would match up with some of the names that I've heard bouncing around that could be committing to BC this week. So first name, Luke Baklanko from Georgia. He is North Carolina. He is a offensive lineman, 6'6". He's got a bunch of big offers. He was on campus. And he could be the guy that could have committed. I think he has one more official visit left. I think it's to Stanford. So it could be him. The other name is Michael Krause, who I interviewed on bcbulletin.com. You can check out that. He talked to me and he said, BC is really high on my list right now. I'm really high on the Eagles. He could be one. And then there's the golden goose, if you want to call it that. Amir Herring, that's the 4-star offensive lineman from West Bloomfield, Michigan, who has a final grouping of like BC, Nebraska, Michigan State, like some really good schools. But he was on campus on an official visit last week, so it could be him as well. Now, when you look at who it could be, some of the decision, some of the evidence of who, like where the commitment's gonna come from. Comes from conversations I've had with recruits, some of the things they tweet and like. So I have my thoughts. Now, just on conversations I had, Michael Krause seems like the most likely just from conversations. He really liked BC. He had a very good visit. He liked it a lot. But the key with Krause is that he still has an official visit to Pittsburgh this weekend. So it might not be him. Amir Herring, if you want to believe it's Amir Herring, you go ahead and do that. I don't think it's going to be Amir Herring. I think he's got way too much, other things going on in other visits. Could BC land him? Sure. He's been very close to the vest in terms of what he says to the media, but BC seems to be up on his list, so he could be someone, but I don't think it's him. For me, it could be Luke Baklanko. Now, he has another official visit, but he was one that I didn't get after a visit, I reach out to all the recruits, and whether they talk to me or not, sometimes as a good barometer of where they're at, right? If it's a kid that's like, yeah, I'm loving it, I'm going to go visit this place too, you get a feel that they're not going to be committing. Sometimes if they're going to commit, they don't really talk. They stay quiet. They don't put out interviews and things like that. And Luke Baklanko has been really quiet. So I saw him retweeting. Someone asked him about the Paisley uniforms, and he talked about Wells Crowther. I got a feeling it's going to be Luke Baklanko. I think that offense, in terms of an offensive lineman, he's a perfect fit for BC. He gives you an offensive tackle that you could use. He's big. He's got a great offer list. He's from a good school. I like what you could get with him. So he's my guess. That's my guess right now. But it could be somebody else. But for that offensive line role, the one that the big dog that Googs was talking about, I'm going to put my money on Baklanko. Now the second player is a bit more of a mystery, and again, you got to play the sleuthing, right? unless a kid comes out and tells me, and I've had it happen. Emmett Moorhead told me right away when he was going to commit. I've had a few others that when I'm talking to them, they're like, yeah, I'm going to be committing tomorrow. I haven't heard anything like that for this group. So I look at the players that are available that were on campus for that other get in tweet from Jeff Halfley. And I look at who's the names that could pop. Who are the names that could definitely be the next commitment for BC? Now, you could go with something simple like Josiah Griffin. He is the brother of wide receiver Joseph Griffin II. He's a senior this year from Springfield, Massachusetts. He's a defensive lineman. And I know he was on campus for an official visit last week, and he would be an easy, given that his brother goes there, and he doesn't have a huge offer list. He's not ranked by 247 Sports yet. I could see him, but I'm not sure. I wonder if he's a take or not. I imagine Halfley doesn't want to upset the Griffin family, but there's other names out there that might be higher on their list. He could be someone. Then there was Parker Jenkins, a running back from Texas, who's got a ton of big offers. And BC already has a running back in Dr. Jones, but based off of what they're offering, I imagine they're going to go for a couple here. Jenkins, from what I've read and talked to, he had a great visit. But I think of him as a guy that's got a little bit more to do in terms of his recruiting trip. I think he's got more that he's going to look into and more avenues that he's going to explore. So I don't think it'll be Parker Jenkins. The name I come back to every single time is Kelby Vaslin, a wide receiver from Bowie, Texas. So Kelby Vaslin, he's 6'2", good size, not ranked, but has started to put together a decent offer list that includes Cal, Colorado, Kansas. And he was on campus last week and tweeted out that he loved the culture and things that are being built there at Boston College. To me, that's a telltale right there, right? He doesn't have any other official visits set up right now that I know of. So to me, Valson, seems like a very high probability of being that other commitment. And, that gives you two wide receivers. That gives you Jaden Skeet from Catholic Memorial, local kid, and a kid from Texas. And that would also be the second, believe it's the second commitment from the state of Texas for Boston College. Again, Jeff Halfley has made a very concerted effort in recruiting that area and understanding that Texas is very talented in terms of high school players. They're much more polished than you could get in, say, New England, where the high school leagues are not as renowned as they are down in the Lone Star State. So I think there's a great get if they get him. I know he's not ranked, but you look at the offer list, that explains to you why BC would take him. So that's my guess. I have been told, just as a heads up, that one of the commitments will be announcing soon. I was told that on Monday, but I haven't heard anything yet. So I'm assuming one's going to pop, and it could happen after I record this. And I got to tell you, folks, I'm not unrecording this podcast. And so I think that could be something else to watch for on Wednesday when you're hanging in the office and clicking refresh on Twitter or whatnot. You could find out who BC is going to land. In a moment, I want to get into the needs list of what Boston College probably still has left with their class of 2023. Look at some of the positions, where Boston College could be spending their last 15 plus scholarship offers. We'll get into that in just a moment. But let me tell you about our good friends at Built Bar. You know how our friends at Built are always coming out with new amazing flavors? Well, this time Built has truly outdone themselves with their new mud pie flavor. And for the first time ever, Built is introducing the new mud pie flavor in both mud pie bar and mud pie puff. Wow, you gotta try those out. Now, sure, what does mud pie taste like? Well, if you're a chocolate fan, you better sit down for this one. The new mud pie bar is rich whipped cream and chocolate mousse, smothered in 100% real chocolate and topped with cookies and cream crumble. You've got to try the mud pie as soon as possible, and if you need to hurry, because the mud pie and mud pie puff are going to sell out fast. So head on over to built.com. Check out their flavor profiles and the nutrition on these bars. 150 calories, 8 grams of sugar. How are you going to beat that? What I just described, it sounds like a decadent treat, but it's a Built Bar. It's good. It's going to give you the fuel you need to get through your day. So head on over to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and you're going to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. We are slammed into recruiting talk here at Locked On Boston College. But before we get into our next subject, I want to tell you about the NBA mock draft. The Ultimate NBA mock draft starts June 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the Ultimate NBA mock draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board draft experts plus the Odyssey insiders. First pick is June 16th. So search the Ultimate NBA mock draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. All right, back to recruiting. The regular team, the football team, the other programs, they're on hiatus right now. Football won't be back on campus for another month. They're working out, doing things like that. But recruiting, the news is coming in fast and furious. And, the next 2 weeks for BC football could easily, give them the foundation of their class for this upcoming 2023 group. Folks have been asking, and I want to kind of talk about it, like what positions are they looking at? What positions are they trying to fill? And where are those scholarships going to go? So first of all, I saw that Connor Cox, a tight end from, I believe, South Carolina, committed to the Gamecocks. And then Jackson Carver, a very well sought after tight end he was from Indiana, I believe, and then moved to Connecticut, committed to the U on Tuesday. So 2 names that were targeted went to other schools. And I had someone ask me, like, AJ, did they just get cooled off on them? And for the tight end position, because that's all we talk about here on Locked On Boston College is tight ends, is that BC landed 2 last year, right? They had Jeremiah Franklin from, Maryland, and Matt Regan from Massachusetts. So 2 then. And then you got Holden Simmons from this year from locally. And you have 3 tight ends. You probably are not going to go with 4 in 2 classes. So my thought with that position is that tight ends are done. I think tight ends are done. They got what they wanted. Because I do believe that they had a chance at Connor Cox. He was on campus when I was at the spring game. I ran into him there. I just don't think they have the room for him. So I think they're going for other positions. Now, I think they're going to sprinkle a lot of different positions out there. And 3 big ones, I think they're going to probably just go with 1 or 2 players at each of these positions. And the first is running back. We mentioned Parker Jenkins from Texas is a big name. But there's also Marquise Collins. There's the kid from Georgia. There's quite a few different names that they could go for. So I don't think they'll go for 3, but I think they'll go for 2 at running back. You know what might not surprise me is if they go for a second quarterback. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility that they land a second quarterback. I mean, if you look at the depth of the quarterback position, it's not that deep. And I'm not saying they're going to go get like Arch Manning or try to get like a elite quarterback. But if like there's a solid kid from one of their feeder schools that they always go after, I could see BC go in there. So that wouldn't be a surprise. I think you're probably going to see 3 offensive linemen. We already saw Mikkow. There's another mystery recruit we just talked about that we don't know about. And I think they'll probably go with a 3rd one. So like if Krause was to commit and Amir Herring wanted to come, they would definitely do that. So I think they'll go with 3 offensive linemen. And now the big question folks have been asking me is linebacker. And I've only seen like 2 linebackers that Boston College is really in on. Pau from Nevada, I believe his name is Pele Fao is his name. He's a 6'1", 215 linebacker from Las Vegas, Nevada. He's coming the last week of camp. I think he'd be one that I would watch to commit. He's only visiting BC and Cal, so I like where BC kind of lands on that. So he'd be one I would watch for. And there's 1 or 2 other kids. So linebacker's not one I don't think BC's going to go all that hard in. I think that will be a quieter position, 1 player if they can get him. Defensive back, I mean, it's become the running joke for recruiting for BC is that Jeff Hafley just recruits a ton of defensive backs. And I think it's going to be the case again this year. Like, you've got a ton of really talented kids. I've mentioned Roderick Pleasant before, but there's others out there that I think BC is going to get involved in. I wouldn't be surprised to get like 4 defensive backs. I mean, 4 or 5 maybe to fill out that position. Because you could do a bunch of different things, right? You can go with the safeties. You can go with defensive backs. You can go with those hybrids at safety linebacker like Sione Hollow was last year. He was considered a defensive back when you talked about the recruiting. But he ended up kind of a hybrid role there for BC. Now, that kind of gives you an overview of where the recruiting is right now. They could also get a kicker or a punter. I'm sure that would happen too. But they have 10 commitments right now. 2 are mystery, so it's 12. It gives them about 13, right? your goal then, so you got 3 from the first week. You probably want to get 3 from the second week. And you're going to get 3 from the final week. That gives you, if my math is correct, 17 or 18 recruits. That gives you some flexibility to get some recruits that come along later, maybe some ones that you're working on. I like that. I think it's kind of a good system for them. And it's not like in years past with Adazio or because of COVID that things just kind of went real fast. I think they're really slowly evaluating these players, and that's how they're finding these diamonds in the rough and guys that aren't diamonds in the rough but are talented players that could do some things for the Eagles. But in our final segment, I want to talk about Googs. I'm going to talk about offensive line coach Dave Deguglielmo, and I want to tell you why I think he's the perfect fit for BC. As he starts to get some commitments on the trail, I think it's really showing why BC landed him as their offensive line coach, and it's a perfect fit. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. So we talked about recruiting, and one name that, as I said, popped up, he's been real quiet for the last couple months, is Dave Deguglielmo. The big dog stuff, when Mitch and I used to have on Sundays our big dog of the week tweets, they've kind of slowed down because Googs has had to go out on the trail. He's traveling all across the country trying to find the next big dog for BC. And he's landed 2. And you're starting to see, if the 2 are, any of the following 3, Luke Baklanko, Michael Krause, and Amir Herring, if it's 2 of those 3, or one of those 3, along with Mikkow, you have to be happy where Googs has started. So I think Googs is a perfect example of the perfect fit for BC for multiple reasons. He has an infectious personality. I am always a big fan, as long as he's authentic about it, that he will that personality that he has. We talked to Christian Mahogany about it. We talked to Dennis Grossell on our podcast. You can check out those interviews in our archive. They have both brought up Googs, and they've talked about how he's, a hoot. He's hilarious out there, right? But he's also very defined and very detail oriented. He's going to help these guys, right? So I think that personality will really resonate on the recruiting trail. And we're starting to see it start to pay dividends because remember, Googs, when he first started recruiting, he kind of had to restart those relationships that these players had with Matt Applebaum, right? The positional coaches for recruiting, it was kind of, tossed to the side for a new coach. And I thought, I was watching for a while, I was like, oh man, what's going to happen here with this coach? Because it doesn't seem like he's doing much. But now he's getting the players on campus. Now he's starting to get some inroads with these kids. And you're starting to see why Dave Deguglielmo is a great fit, especially on the recruiting trail. But it's not just the recruiting trail that I see him succeeding for BC. I put up on Locked On BC's Twitter page a poll that said, what's some of the biggest concerns for next year? And one that I put up there, so I had the health of Phil Dracovic, the play of the defensive line, but I think the one that ended up winning was the play of the offensive line. And I could totally get the nervousness about this, right? And we've talked about this before. There's 4 new offensive linemen starting next year. It's projected right now to be Jack Conley, Finn Durstein, Drew Kendall, and Ozzie Trapillo around Christian Mahogany. But what could be the easiest way to get around the youth issue? Because, you don't have to be a Boston College fan to remember some of the excuses that Steve Adazio made about youth. Well, you get a coach in here that is experienced and has the wherewithal to work with younger kids. And I think that's where Googs works well, right? You got a guy that has been and seen everything. He's been to Super Bowls. He's coached in college ranks. He's coached with Tom Coughlin. He knows he's a well of information, and he's not just a funny meme creator or whatever. He is he's got that background. Now, he's not asked to do. Patriots fans are going to go, well, the year that Googs was the offensive line coach for Belichick, he was a mess. Well, I would also argue that this doesn't have to do with BC playing at the college ranks, and that's a big difference, right? You're gonna get Clemson, but you also get other teams that aren't as good, and Clemson's going to be out of this world. But I love the ability, I think, of Googs to work with these young players that haven't had a ton of time, whether it's Drew Kendall or Ozzie Trapillo or Jack Conley, who have not really they haven't really received the starter snaps that you'd want for an experienced offensive line. I think Googs is going to be able to teach them things. And I think no knock on Matt Applebaum, but I think he's a better fit for this. Applebaum obviously had some experience, but it's nowhere near the level that Googs has. And so as we get prepared for the Boston College 2022 season, I'm going to be going to practices and get to talk to the staff and stuff like that. But I'm looking at this offensive line. I want to see what they're going to be able to do. How are they going to look in practice? How are they going to look in scrimmages? And I think that should give us a better signal. And I honestly think BC put themselves in the best position, knowing the issues that they had coming into this season, to win with that offensive line by hiring a coach like Dave Googs. And I'm not going to get into the order of operations. Did Matt Applebaum get fired first, or did he go to another school, or whatever happened? That's all behind the doors, closed stuff that we don't know, and people can guess and rumor and speculate on. But whatever the case, BC ended up on the right end of it, getting an offensive line coach, I think, that will be an asset come the end of the season. Well, thank you all for listening. This is AJ Black. I've had a cold all day. I've got a really bad stomach bug. And so I'm going to go and sleep because I am exhausted. Thank you all for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC or at LockedOnBC. Thank you all. Take care.